Hey everybody, this is part two of our look at values and my kind of breakdown deconstruction lecture from the values video from Ethics Unwrapped. So if you haven't seen part one, make sure you watch that first, otherwise this won't make a ton of sense. Here I'm going to mark up the PDF just like I did the first time, and we're going to focus on these last three paragraphs here. First, I want you all to understand the difference between intrinsic and instrumental. Um, Intrinsic value means the thing has value because of what it is. So my children, right, they have value just because of what they are. A nice painting may have value just because it's beautiful and we like it. That's often contrasted to instrumental value, or things that have instrumental value, which are valuable only because of what they let us do. So a hammer is valuable only because it lets us hammer in nails. It ceases to have value when it doesn't do its job anymore. So a hammer has instrumental value. Money is often something that we say has instrumental value because money isn't good for anything in and of itself. It's only good for what it lets us do. Buy things, have a nice house, go on vacation, whatever, whatever. So the difference between intrinsic and instrumental value is something really important that comes out in these last few paragraphs that I want you guys to understand. The next two terms that come up in these last three paragraphs that I want you all to understand are sacred, and the second one is moral imperatives. I think we have an understanding of what sacred means. Often it means holy, but in this case it means uncompromisable, like values we will not give up, values that we are kind of trump cards when it comes to decision making. Moral imperatives are statements or phrases or rules that we must follow, right? And so we will revisit this idea of a moral imperative a number of times throughout the rest of the class. But basically, it's just the idea that if something is a moral imperative, it's something we must do, right? It is a rule or a value that has command over us. It's really those four terms I want you guys to take out of these final paragraphs because, to be honest, the rest of the stuff in these two paragraphs is not great. Um, While it's true that philosophers and most of us will often distinguish between intrinsic and instrumental things, or intrinsic or instrumental values, it's very much an open question whether something like responsibility is just an instrumental value, or whether or not responsibility has intrinsic value. So I get upset when I see responsibility described as an instrumental value. Just like responsibility, the idea, it's a very much an open question whether or not there are any such thing as sacred values. I mean, individually there certainly are. There are things that, I may not compromise regardless. Um, but whether or not there are such things that everyone ought to value is still pretty much an open question. And even if it is a sacred value for me, then it's still very much part of my moral decision making, right? That we use it as kind of the decision trump card when it comes time to figure out what we ought to do. So really, from these paragraphs, these final three paragraphs from the values video, I want you all to understand what intrinsic and instrumental are, what a sacred value might be, and what a moral imperative is. But the rest of it, the examples and that sort of thing, I want you guys to just sort of hold off on, because one of the things we are going to explore is whether or not there are such things as sacred values, and whether or not there are such things as intrinsic values or things that have intrinsic worth. Those kinds of questions, the existence of the sacred, the existence of things that have intrinsic value, and what those things might be, are the big important philosophical questions for this kind of discussion.